The first episode of this anime begins with Jill running away from a group of guards. Exhausted but determined, she refuses to surrender and attacks them, declaring that even if she perishes, she must ensure her enemy dies. Fueled by anger, she insists that her enemy will not mock her. Gerald, a boy who appears before her, tells her that her time is up and she will be executed immediately instead of tomorrow, as originally scheduled. Jill, filled with memories, recalls the night Gerald proposed to her, claiming to love her from the moment they met. Initially, she found him sweet, but she soon learned of his true nature. In the present, Gerald expresses disbelief that the woman who is supposed to be his wife refuses to admit her crimes and runs away. Jill argues that the accusations are false, but Gerald is fixated on how the situation affected his sister, Ferris, who he holds above everything else. When asked how Jill escaped, she proudly responds that she overpowered the guard who relied too much on his strength. Gerald grabs her by the hair and tells her that had she remained loyal, she could have lived a long life, raising his children. But now, he feels it's better that she won't have the chance to pass on her traits to their offspring. Gerald orders the guards to take her away, but Jill manages to escape and attacks him with a sword, failing to kill him before fleeing again. She climbs to the top of a tower and defiantly tells Gerald that he didn't abandon her, she abandoned him. She then leaps from the tower. Gerald orders his guards to shoot arrows, and he hurls a spear at her. When Jill tries to stop the spear, she finds it impossible, as if it has a will of its own. Determined not to be defeated, Jill recalls her past decisions, lamenting that everything would have been different if she had made better choices. As the spear pierces Jill's body, the clock strikes midnight and she dies. However, something strange happens. The clock starts spinning backward, and time rewinds. Jill wakes up to find her parents, who had passed away, alive and in front of her. Shocked, she realizes she is no longer in the present, but in the past, right before Prince Gerald's 15th birthday. Jill, her father Lord Serval, and her mother arrive at the royal capital for the birthday celebration. Jill is stunned to see that Gerald is only 15, as he should be 21. As she enters the ballroom with her family, Jill becomes overwhelmed and terrified when she sees Prince Gerald again. She quickly excuses herself, telling her parents she needs fresh air. Outside, Jill reflects on the past, looking at the palace that hasn't changed. She notices Princess Ferris' bedroom and recalls how her engagement to Gerald was merely a cover for his forbidden love for his sister. When Jill discovered their incestuous relationship, she broke off the engagement, which led to her being falsely accused and sentenced to death for attempting to poison the princess. Standing on the balcony, Jill questions whether this is reality or a dream. She is baffled by her return to the past, her parents being alive, and her younger self. She wonders if this is an opportunity to fix everything. At that moment, Prince Gerald enters, and Jill, anxious and sweating, tries to avoid reliving the painful future. Gerald approaches her, intending to express his admiration, but Jill, desperate to escape, excuses herself and rushes back to her parents. As Gerald follows her, Jill panics and lies, claiming she has fallen in love at first sight with the person standing behind her. To her horror, the person behind her speaks, and Jill recognizes the voice. The man expresses his happiness and declares that he will make her his wife. He introduces himself, asking for her name, and upon realizing she is the daughter of Margrave Serval, he comments on her significant magical power. Jill realizes that, although this man is a prince, her decision was completely wrong. She remembers that 6 years from now, this man will unleash his overwhelming power and madness, plunging the kingdom into a sea of fire. He is one of their greatest enemies, the cursed emperor of the neighboring lands. The cursed man then introduces himself as Hades. Hades accepts her offer of marriage, leaving Jill completely shocked. Her face reflects utter disbelief, as if she were burning inside. Later, Jill wakes up in an unfamiliar room, wondering where she is and if this is a room in the royal palace. As she rises and looks out the window, Hades appears behind her, checking on her. He kneels before her and proposes again, expressing disbelief at what happened earlier and wanting to confirm that it wasn't just a dream. Jill, lost in thought, realizes that this impression of Hades is completely different from the one she had of him in the future. She recalls how, in the future, Hades ordered his men to slaughter everyone, men, women, children, and elders with a deliberate cruelty. He instructed them to gouge out eyes in front of mothers, cut off fingertips, and force siblings to kill each other. His goal was to leave no trace of hope, love, or dreams, destroying everything. Jill had urged him to lay down his weapons and withdraw his forces, as their enemies would eventually surrender. In response, Rafi, Hades' future self, used his power to strike her down for issuing commands to his army. She pleaded for him to torture her instead, but he cruelly mocked her, promising that she would one day regret her words. However, Jill, fueled by anger, declared that she would never retract her statement. Eventually, Rafi lost interest and ordered his forces to retreat. The story then flashes back to when Jill was younger. Rafi asks her how she's feeling and whether she's made a decision about the marriage proposal. When Jill remains silent, Rafi tells her not to feel pressured. He offers her the choice to lie down, or if she chooses to stay awake, to put on her shoes to avoid cold feet. He then gently places her shoes on her feet, which embarrasses Jill as she is treated like a lady despite her inexperience in such situations. At that moment, Gerald bursts in, angrily demanding to know what Jill is thinking, accusing her of running away when he tried to talk to her. Rafi silences him, telling Gerald not to pressure a young girl like Jill. Ignoring him, Gerald questions Rafi's presence, to which Rafi replies that it's only natural for him to be concerned about his fiancée. Gerald, outraged, declares that Jill is not Rafi's fiancée and that his parents never approved of it, that he reveals that he himself is the one planning to propose to her, as the decision has already been made between their families. Gerald then insists that Rafi stop interfering in their kingdom's affairs. Rafi mocks Gerald, suggesting that his frustration stems from rejection. Turning to Jill, Rafi tells her they should talk elsewhere, as they can't have a comfortable conversation here. Gerald snaps, ordering them not to move, but Rafi calmly leads Jill out, warning Gerald not to confront him, as he could never defeat him. Gerald, intimidated by Rafi's power, does nothing as they leave the room. As they wander through the palace, Rafi apologizes to Jill for scaring her and assures her that he won't let anyone harm her. He tells her that this won't deter Prince Gerald, as love and conflict often go hand in hand. He also explains that her magical energy is still unstable, so they will travel by ship to his empire. Rafi promises that with his magic they can reach his empire in just a few hours. On board the ship, Rafi gives Jill new clothes, and she feels some relief at having escaped Gerald, though she knows the situation isn't over yet. Later, during tea, Rafi uses his magic to summon a large cake, which delights Jill. Jill, overjoyed by the delicious cake, eagerly starts eating. As she enjoys the treat, she asks Rafi how serious he is about their engagement, especially considering the significant age difference between them. Rafi responds that the arrangement is ideal. He explains that her immense magical power makes her exactly the kind of woman he's been seeking. He expresses disbelief that she came to him and offered marriage, assuring her that his plan for a perfect, happy family will not be disrupted by something as trivial as the age difference. Jill becomes angry, feeling that Rafi has taken what she views as a child's joke too seriously, so seriously that he kidnapped her. Upset, Rafi demands to know if the marriage proposal was a lie. He insists that he needs to understand her true intentions, asking Jill directly if she really wants to marry him. Jill, feeling guilty, apologizes and explains that certain circumstances led to the proposal and that, yes, it was originally meant as a joke. At that moment, a small dinosaur appears, laughing at Rafi. The dinosaur mocks him, saying, "I told you she's young. She proposed to me after our first meeting, so of course there were other reasons behind it. You're the only one who could get so excited and believe such a thing so easily, you incompetent romantic." Furious, Rafi snaps back, threatening to serve roast dragon for dinner that night. Jill then reflects on ancient legends, recalling the stories of Kratos, the deity of love and land, and the dragons of logic and sky. These myths date back to the founding of nations and speak of how these beings dragged humanity through 1,000 years of war. Kratos' kingdom is a grand magical realm where most citizens possess magical abilities. In contrast, people with significant magical power are rare in Rafi's empire. Back in the present, Rafi is still angry at the small dragon, threatening to kill it. The dragon speaks to Jill, explaining that she can see and communicate with it because she has met all the necessary conditions. It adds that the age difference between her and Rafi isn't unusual, so Rafi agrees, sharing that his mother married his father when she was 16 and he was 40, but he emphasizes that they should follow a natural sequence of events, allowing time for them to mature and understand each other better. Jill points out that relying solely on books leaves a person unbalanced and adds that Rafi's appearance and personality don't quite align. She apologizes again, confessing that she never imagined he would take her proposal so seriously. Rafi acknowledges that it's unlikely for a young girl with immense magical power to suddenly develop feelings for a man like him, but he vows to repay her kindness someday. He assures her that he will never forget her name and promises to return her to Kree, where all that awaits her is the obsessed prince and her grim fate. Jill, reflecting on the chaotic events, realizes she had forgotten about the consequences of her actions. She remembers that she made the proposal to take advantage of Rafi and planned to discard the offer once it no longer served her purpose. However, After observing Rafi's genuine nature, she reconsiders. Turning to Rafi, Jill says she takes back everything she previously said. She expresses her sincerity now and tells him she truly wants to marry him. She vows to take responsibility for her words, promising to move forward without backing down, and assures him that this time she will keep her promise to make him happy. We then see Jill apologizing to King Hades and promising that she will never break her word to him again. She vows to dedicate her entire life to making him happy and fixing everything. Surprised, King Hades asks her if this means he will actually have a wife. Jill replies that it will happen one day, but asks for their marriage to be in name only for now since she is still young. Overjoyed, King Hades picks her up and tells her he doesn't mind if it's just a name. He promises to take good care of her and prove his sincerity. He then kisses her hands and asks the small dragon, Rafi, to bless Jill as his wife. Rafi uses his magic, and a dragon's marriage ring appears on Jill's hand, symbolizing the Emperor's wife receiving the dragon's blessings. King Hades explains that as long as she wears the ring, they are engaged and she is his wife even before the official wedding ceremony. Suddenly, their ship is attacked and King Hades, growing tired, asks Rafi to take Jill to the harbor to protect her. Jill refuses, deciding to protect the king instead. Using her power, she lifts the entire ship and throws it away from the cannon fire, then strikes one of the bombs, causing it to explode at a safe distance. So they eventually reach the harbor, and Jill informs the soldiers that King Hades is aboard and needs medical attention. As Emperor Hades is taken to be treated, Jill speaks with Rafi, who thanks her for saving the king. He warns her to lower her voice, so the soldiers don't think she's talking to herself, reminding her that only she and Hades can see him. Then, a girl named Saphir appears, asking about the Emperor's condition. A soldier reassures her that he is being treated. Rafi tells Jill that Saphir, the daughter of Lord Markabel, is her rival for Emperor Hades' love and a candidate to be his fiancée. Saphir approaches Jill angrily, calling her a little girl and accusing her of trying to steal the Emperor. She vows not to let Jill have him, calling her a horrible thief before storming off. Later that night, Jill reflects on a future tragedy she knows about. During a banquet celebrating the Emperor's return from Kredos, Saphir would kill the other candidates and set the palace on fire, sparking a civil war. Jill worries that if this happens, it will lead to conflict with Kratos, and she doesn't want to lose her family, homeland, or soldiers. Rafi appears, asking what's wrong. He warns Jill that dwelling on the situation will only make her depressed. Jill asks about the Emperor's condition, and Rafi tells her that Hades has woken up and asked about her first thing. When he learned that Jill had met Saphir, he became very worried for her. Suddenly, King Hades enters the room, dressed in servant's clothing, holding pastries he made for Jill. She is shocked and scolds him for acting like a child, reminding him that he is the king. Hades grins and feeds her a pastry, and when Jill finds it delicious, he teases her, saying that she can't reject him now and that they'll be bound together by crescents forever. Jill becomes angry, slaps him, and asks why he came. Hades explains that he wanted to see her and informs her that he has ordered soldiers to escort her to the imperial capital once he recovers. Jill wonders if Marcus Bell ignored Hades' orders and if he might be behind the ship attack. Hades replies that if Marcus Bell is rebelling, he must be brave to challenge the cursed emperor. Jill then asks if the rumors about Hades being cursed are true. Hades admits that the situation is difficult for him, but he wants Jill to love him. Rafi intervenes, saying that Hades tends to stumble over his words, suggesting they leave the matter for now. Hades continues, explaining that he wasn't always in line for the throne. His mother was a concubine, so he was sent to the borderlands as a way to remove him from the royal court. His mother thought he was frightening because he could see Rafi when no one else could. Hades recalls that strange things started happening on his 11th birthday. His older brother, the crown prince, suddenly died of illness, followed by the next crown prince drowning in a bath and another committing suicide. All the crown princes died in bizarre ways, one after another, every year on Hades' birthday. Eventually, Hades was summoned to the capital and made the crown prince, but shortly afterward, his father disappeared, and on the day of his coronation, his mother killed herself. This series of tragic events led to him being labeled the cursed emperor. Hades concludes his story, leaving Jill with a full understanding of the dark and twisted circumstances surrounding his rise to power. Rafi clarifies that he wasn't the one who cursed the Demon King. The Demon King then explains that his brother convinced everyone to support him, and as a result, things have been relatively peaceful for now. Jill reflects on the future, remembering that the informant who will provide her key information will be Prince Viziel. He will accuse the Emperor of murdering his elder brother and half-siblings, but none of them will survive. Despite knowing this, Jill reminds herself to stay calm. Returning to the present, Jill speaks to the Demon King, asking him if he feels the way his family and the Empire treated him was unfair. The Demon King responds that he doesn't know, but he accepts his role as Emperor. He explains that these are his people and his family, and denying that would mean surrendering to fate. He's already come to terms with his losses and reassures Jill that the curse is no longer a concern. He says that having a wife like her is more important, and they should be able to live peacefully for at least 3 years. However, Jill senses he's hiding something. She acknowledges that he has many enemies and asks him how he plans to deal with them. The Demon King replies that if Marquis attempts anything, he will crush him completely, though he prefers not to use violence unless forced. Jill offers to handle things, confidently stating that she's smart enough to take care of it. Suddenly, the Demon King collapses from exhaustion but assures Jill that he's fine. Despite the serious situation, he cheerfully mentions wanting to bake cakes and bread just for her. An attendant warns him not to overexert himself, reminding him not to end up bedridden again. Raffi thanks the attendant, expressing that he feels like a younger brother to the Demon King. The next day, Jill, disguised as a young man, walks through the streets and overhears Princess Tucker talking to a priest in a church. Sappho is certain that the person in question is Emperor Hades, but she's unsure why there is any doubt about his identity. She confides in the priest, saying that her father, Marquis Bell, seems concerned for her since she's a candidate to become Emperor Hade's fiancée. However, Sappho notes that Hades prefers his fiancées to be younger than 14 and she's already 16. Jill contemplates what to do with this information and whether to inform Raffi. She then overhears the guards talking about sending a signal to close the gates, realizing that they plan to capture Sappho. Soon after, soldiers enter the church to arrest Saphir. Jill, initially hesitant since she was only there to gather information, decides to intervene and enters the church. Meanwhile, Raffi is in his room when Marquis Bell informs him that an unknown force has taken over the seaport. The attackers are reportedly under the envoy Raffi brought from Kuritos, and they've taken Bell's daughter, Saphir, as a hostage. Bell plans to send special forces to rescue her. Raffi asks about his fiancée, which irritates Bell, who accuses her of being a spy. He blames himself for the port's fall and requests that the northern forces not withdraw from the city immediately. Raffi agrees but warns that if his fiancée is innocent, he will take appropriate action. Back at the church, Saphir and Jill are thrown into a cell after the guards discover Jill's true identity as a girl. The guards celebrate, knowing that capturing Saphir is a major achievement. Saphir angrily reminds them that she's Marquis Bell's daughter, but the guards tell her to stay quiet. Saphir, however, remains confident that Emperor Hades will come to rescue them. Jill listens as Saphir recounts her story. Her father asked her to consult the priest about Emperor Hades, someone to whom she owes a great debt. She lost her mother at a young age, and after her father remarried, she was sent to live elsewhere but didn't fit in. She often escaped to a place where dragons rested, and though she didn't understand their language, she felt a connection with them. Saphir explains that after Emperor Hades ascended the throne, he asked to meet her. During their first meeting, he asked if she saw something on his shoulder, but she couldn't see anything. Her parents scolded her for this, saying her answer was wrong and that they had to repay the money used to send her there. However, Hades protected her, and that's why she wants to help him. She confessed her feelings to Hades before he left for Kratos, but he rejected her because she wasn't under 14 years old. Listening to this, Jill is disillusioned with Hades, feeling that his rejection tarnishes everything good about him. Saphir continues, explaining that she started to think Hades used that excuse to disregard her feelings, especially after he brought a younger girl from Kratos. Jill considers helping Saphir, but knows that both her father and the priest are involved in the schemes. If they escape, Jill risks being labeled as the leader of Saphir's kidnappers. Jill concludes that her only option is to expose the Marcus schemes in front of everyone, but she's unsure how to achieve that alone. Just then, Zeke and Camilla enter the prison, arguing with each other and blaming one another for the chaos. Jill recognizes them and they are surprised that she knows them. Camilla reassures Jill, saying she's like a big sister to her. Jill recalls a past connection and begins to cry, telling Camilla not to be scared of Zeke, even though he looks stern. Jill reflects that in 6 years she will lose so much, but now she realizes that nothing has been taken from her yet. For the first time since traveling back in time, she knows everything is still in the future, and she resolves not to lose anything this time. The story continues with Jill and Miss Saphir in a cell, surrounded by strange people who are talking to themselves. Jill stands up and tells everyone to be quiet because Miss Saphir is frightened. Using her powers, Jill breaks the chains on her hands and then frees the others in the cell. Everyone is shocked and wonders how she did it. Jill brushes it off, saying it's not important right now. What matters is figuring out their next step and stopping the fighting. One of the prisoners explains that after gathering information, they discovered that savages had disguised themselves as northern soldiers, infiltrated their ranks, lowered the gate, and separated the town from the port. They also took the Marquis Bill's daughter hostage and seized control of the port. Another prisoner asked why they would disguise themselves as northern soldiers, who were supposed to defend the port. The first prisoner replies that while she knew the Marquise hated them, she never expected this kind of action. Then Safer tells the group that all the turmoil was caused by the girl named Jill, the one brought by the Emperor. The imprisoned woman says that things are starting to make sense. She predicts that the Marquis Bill will send his own soldiers to quell the disturbances, but after they defeat the savages, he will realize that the northern forces are no longer needed and ask them to leave Belberg. If Jill truly incited these events, it will reflect badly on the Emperor, especially if Miss Saffir dies. The Marquis will rise to power and do whatever he pleases. The woman then points out something strange. The girl who supposedly caused all this chaos wasn't in the room where she had been locked up. A guard adds that he was guarding Jill's room when the savages came in, repeatedly asking about the girl. This confuses everyone further. Why were the savages looking for the girl they were supposedly working for? They decide that when the Marquis Bill's forces arrive, they will blend into the chaos and leave the Empire, ensuring they never tell the Emperor anything. Saphir, however, states that she will inform the Emperor. She urges the others to escape and hide while she remains, as it won't be easy for the savages to kill her due to her close relationship with the Emperor. If they can't find the spy, they will need her testimony as a victim, and she will find a way to inform the Emperor, who won't ignore something like this. Jill reflects on this plan and thinks to herself about Camilla and Zeke. She doesn't fully understand their motives for coming to Kratos, but if they get involved and Miss Saffir helps them escape, Saffir will be left behind while Camilla and Zeke flee. Saffir will die, carrying the shame of her father. This is the full backstory behind the murder-suicide incident in Belberg. Jill then removes her hat and addresses everyone, revealing that she is Jill Serville, the girl they've been talking about, the one accused of being a spy and causing the incident. She explains that she is trapped just like them, but the enemy doesn't know her location yet, giving them a chance to win. She suggests that they rescue the imprisoned northern forces, protect Miss Saffir, and retake the port from the traitors. Camilla agrees, noting that clearing the northern forces' name will expose who planted the suspicion that Jill was a spy. Zeke adds that if they succeed, the Marquis won't be able to stay silent. They both support Jill's plan. Jill then turns to Miss Saffir, asking for her opinion, as the mission's success hinges on her survival. Jill urges Saffir to officially accuse her father and promises to protect her, warning that if she doesn't, she will be discarded one day. Saffir asks Jill why she is trying to save her, given that they are rivals in love. Jill responds that she has no intention of falling in love with the Emperor. They are engaged due to certain circumstances and will likely marry in name only, without any real feelings for each other. Saffir hints that she could still try to betray the Emperor. Jill calmly explains that despite the marriage being in name only, they chose each other for a reason, and there's no need for concern. She also made a promise to herself to make the Emperor happy. The scene shifts to Emperor Ravi, who is speaking to his personal dragon. He expresses his concern for Jill's safety, emphasizing how important she is to him. Ravi notes that Marquis Bill is trying to escalate the situation, but he sees Marquis Bill as nothing more than a disposable tool. He intends to use this opportunity to get rid of what's no longer necessary and bring Belberg under his direct control. As for Miss Saffir, Ravi remarks that when her father dies and the Belberg family collapses, she can die of heartbreak afterward. The story shifts back to Jill, who reassures Miss Saffir that she is on her side, just like the Emperor. Saffir begins to cry, telling Jill that she believes her and agrees to officially accuse her father. Jill promises to protect her with all her strength. Everyone is astonished by Jill's confidence and maturity, noting that she seems far older than her actual age. Jill then tells the group that they need to act quickly before the Marquis arrives. One of the prisoners asks about the first step to obtaining weapons. Jill responds that they will leave the cell and free the imprisoned northern forces to bolster their numbers. A blonde soldier informs Jill that the northern forces are being held in a church and that many of them are injured. Jill instructs him to lead the way. Camilla and Zeke offer to guard Miss Saffir, but they ask Jill how they will escape from the cell. Jill surprises everyone by saying she will destroy the wall. She strikes the wall with her bare hand, causing it to explode like a bomb. Jill then rushes toward a soldier who is about to harm the hostages, striking him in the head. She quickly deflects another soldier's shot and delivers a powerful blow to him as well. Soon after, her friends arrive, apologizing for the delay, and they help tie up the enemies. Also guys, if you are enjoying my videos, then please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more anime recaps. The story continues with Jill speaking to the injured soldiers, introducing herself as someone sent under the Emperor's orders to save them. She informs them that Marquis Bill orchestrated the attack and set a trap to capture the Northern forces and weaken the Emperor's power. Jill also reveals that she has been falsely accused of being a spy, and that Miss Sapphire is being used as a disposable pawn in the scheme. She urges the soldiers not to let these cowardly and savage acts continue. Jill tells the soldiers who can still move to form a barrier and prepare for the enemy's attacks. She addresses the injured, reassuring them that their wounds are marks of honor and that there is no shame in them. She praises them as great warriors, telling them that even if they die, they will be martyrs on the battlefield. Jill continues her motivational speech, encouraging the Northern soldiers to hold their heads high. She tells them that this is the moment they've all been waiting for, the moment to liberate the port and restore their honor with their own hands. Her powerful words inspire the soldiers, and they begin chanting her name, seeing her as a leader, even resembling the head of an army. The scene shifts to Emperor Robbie, who is preparing food. He speaks to Hades, praising Jill for her incredible actions, noting that she escaped using her powers and is now fighting the enemy. Hades is surprised and asks what's happening. Ravi explains that Jill and the Northern forces are protecting Miss Sapphire in a church and repelling the enemy under Jill's command. The soldiers believe the Emperor sent Jill to rescue them, and she gave them a speech about fighting under the Emperor's banner. Robbie then tells Hades about Jill's actions during the fight. Hades expresses concern about the town's damages, but Robbie assures him that the fighting is confined to the port. Hades, though still worried about potential losses, decides that the costs of rebuilding can be taken from Marquis Bill's wealth. He believes it's better to take that route than destroy Bill's noble family. At that moment, 2 guards sent by Marquis Bill arrive, asking Hades to leave for safety because traitors are on their way to the castle. Hades refuses, realizing the guards are trying to block his path. He informs them that the Northern forces are about to reclaim the port unexpectedly. The scene returns to Jill and the Northern forces, who have just finished a fight. Jill orders them to return to the church, where they begin defending and fortifying the windows and entrance under her direction. At this point, Hugo, the enemy commander, arrives and offers the Northern forces a deal. If they tie up and hand over the spy, he will withdraw from the port. If they refuse, he threatens to burn down the church. Faced with this threat, the soldiers turn to Jill for guidance, unsure of what to do since reclaiming the port now seems impossible. Jill decides to confront the enemy commander herself, despite objections from those around her, who remind her that she's still a child. Jill doesn't listen. She asks Camilla to bring her a rope and instructs the soldiers to protect Miss Sapphire in her absence. Jill devises a plan, allowing herself to be tied up and then handed over to the enemy. The guard takes her out and informs Hugo that they've agreed to the deal. Hugo, seeing Jill, is surprised that the supposed spy is just a little girl and assures his men they won't attack her. However, he starts preparing for an escape, telling his men they don't have time to kill everyone. Suddenly, Jill uses her magic to attack Hugo, showing immense strength. She captures him and orders his soldiers to retreat, threatening Hugo's life. Hugo shouts that Jill is bluffing and tells his men to kill her. Jill strikes him down and commands his soldiers to surrender. Just then, a messenger arrives, announcing that all their ships have been destroyed. Furious, Hugo questions Jill, accusing her of sinking their ships. Jill confirms it, declaring that their escape is now impossible. In a different part of the city, we see an old priest preparing to kill the princess, but Camilla intervenes, stopping him and mocking the situation. She remarks that a priest attacking others with a knife must signal the end of the world. They capture the priest and head outside, where Zeke sarcastically offers his condolences to Hugo, pointing out that the princess is safe and sound. Hugo, realizing his defeat, asks for his men to be spared. Jill demands to know who Hugo is working for, and he reveals that it's Marquis Bill. Marquis Bill soon arrives on the scene and kills most of his own soldiers. He approaches Jill, recognizing her as the girl who deceived the Emperor, and comments on her youth, yet acknowledges that she is clearly a sorceress from Kratos. Jill calmly welcomes him, informing him that the Northern forces have already defeated the savages and retaken the port. She adds that he is too late. Marquis Bill, however, insists that he's arrived just in time, claiming that all he has to do now is eliminate everyone. Suddenly, Hades sees a dragon flying toward the castle through the window. He tells Ravi that they need to go to Jill, and he plans to save her from the dragon and protect her. The enormous dragon lands in front of Jill, who tells everyone to retreat into the church. The dragon attacks, but Jill, realizing that if she dodges the church will burn, stands her ground. Marquis Bill is shocked and orders the dragon to attack. However, Hades, standing on top of a nearby building, declares that the dragon can't act because the one standing in front of it is the Emperor of Dragons. The episode ends with this tense confrontation. The episode opens with Emperor Hades declaring that he cannot leave his wife behind as he seeks refuge in a secure place. He then approaches Jill and asks how she is. Jill assures him she's fine and expresses her happiness that he's concerned for her. Hades then asks how things went at the seaport. Jill explains that the news of the port's capture was a deception by the enemy to distract them, and that she and Miss Sappho defended the northern forces and secured the port. Suddenly, Belle, angry, accuses Jill of being a spy, warning Emperor Hades that the enemy is still present at the port. Belle advises the Emperor not to leave the palace and offers to justify Jill's presence as merely being exploited by the enemy. Jill retorts, calling Belle a coward and challenging his accusation. Emperor Hades then approaches one of the soldiers, seizes him by the neck, and greets him sarcastically, commending him for his efforts in the northern forces. The soldiers are surprised that the Emperor knows their names, to which he explains that he believes an emperor should know his soldiers personally. He orders them to share any information they have about the mastermind behind the attacks. The soldiers, recognizing his authority, kneel before Hades, and one soldier, Hugo, informs him that Marquis Bell is behind the scheme. Hades approaches Bell, strikes him, and places his head under his foot, warning him that he's as good as dead and has lost the right to speak. He reminds Bell of his previous warning that if Jill was innocent, he would be held accountable for his crimes. Hades contemplates various punishments for Bell, wondering whether to execute him by fire, torture, or to hand him over to Bilberg. In the meantime, Miss Sappho, fearful for her father, finds comfort from Jill, who assures her that the Emperor will spare him if he cooperates by handing over Bilberg and confessing his crimes. Bell, however, mocks the Emperor, questioning whether he is capable of mercy, especially given his reputation for having driven his mother to suicide. He asks Jill if she would intervene to prevent the Emperor from executing an enemy or support the punishment for the kingdom's greater good. Bell sneers at Hades, taunting him by asking how many people had to die for him to become emperor, accusing him of being despised by the empire. Hades acknowledges that this may be true, but asserts that he is the emperor, whether people like it or not. He then orders the soldiers to take Bell away for interrogation, demanding they learn everything they can from him. Later that night, Jill wanders through the palace corridors, uncertain of where to go. A dragon named Raffi appears, asking if she is lost, and guides her to her room. Jill inquires about the servants, to which Raffi explains that this palace once belonged to Marquis Bell, and his servants are now too terrified to be of any use. Jill then asks Raffi about the Emperor, and Raffi shares that while the Emperor may seem foolish at times, he is actually very aware that he must avoid appearing weak or naive. Raffi goes on to explain that Hades always had the hidden potential to be Emperor, but his typical demeanor makes it difficult for others to see his true abilities. He's working to restore order without relying on fear. Jill remarks that if Hades continues like this, he may become numb to his own emotions and those of others. Raffi agrees, noting that the Emperor's limited social interactions have skewed his sense of closeness, and his extreme desire to break his curse has led him to believe it will earn him love. Jill suggests that they could help the Emperor learn to connect with people, perhaps by encouraging him to be more approachable. Raffi, sensing her feelings, asks if she truly likes the Emperor. Jill clarifies that any romantic connection is impossible at this point, and that their relationship is strictly one of mutual benefit. Finally, they reach her bedroom, and Raffi informs her that she and the Emperor will be sharing the room for security reasons. Surprised, Jill questions if the Emperor is actually inside. Raffi confirms, pointing out that they are married, so it is natural for them to share a room. Jill entered the room to find Emperor Hades asleep on the bed, completely unaware of her presence. He had drunk quite a bit of wine, which clouded his mind and was harmful to his health. Seeing his high temperature, Jill poured water on him to wake him up, bringing his fever down from 40 degrees Celsius. As he began to regain consciousness, she comforted him and brought some fruit for him to eat. Surprised, Hades asked if she was caring for him. She replied affectionately, saying, "How could I not take care of you? You're my husband." He thanked her, expressing that having her by his side was more valuable to him than any remedy. Then he requested some apples. Jill took a knife to slice one, though her technique was rather unusual. Laughing, he commented on her clumsiness, lifted her onto his lap, and with her face turning red, demonstrated the proper way to cut the fruit, expertly peeling the apple. Impressed, Jill asked him to shape a few slices into little rabbits, which he did easily, much to her amazement. Jill praised him, calling him a genius, and he humbly explained that everything becomes easy with practice. She took a slice for herself and smiled, noting how charming he looked. Hades, however, grew slightly annoyed when she mentioned that he reminded her of her little brother, as she had come from a large family. He objected, asserting, "How could you compare me to a younger brother? I'm your husband, which means I'm your love and your friend." Jill then confessed that she had yet to tell her family about their marriage. She thanked him for rescuing her from the savages that day, adding that although he could have punished them as emperor, he had chosen not to. Hades replied, explaining that he hadn't done it because he knew she despised violence and executions. "Saving my wife and my love is only natural," he said. Jill then expressed her concerns, telling him that if anyone dared to insult or belittle him, he should put them in their place. Hades, touched by her love, realized the affection in her gaze, and his face turned red, just like the apple they had been sharing. He teased her, saying it seemed she had fallen in love with him, but she countered that she treated him like a younger brother, which left him both surprised and slightly exasperated. Feigning coldness, he moved away from her, claiming he felt a chill, though it was only an excuse. Then he quickly pulled her close, reassuring her that love between spouses was normal and nothing to feel shy about. He added playfully that if she hadn't fallen for him yet, he was tempted to uncover everything about her. As they continued talking, Jill eventually fell asleep. Her young age under 14 and her strong magic, which even allowed her to see the dragon Rafi, became apparent to him. Hades only wished to experience the feeling of love without demanding anything more. The next day, Hades sat with Jill, enjoying a perfectly cooked roasted duck. He shared some with her, and she delighted in its rich flavor. He also discussed their marriage arrangement, suggesting that if she agreed, Camilla and Zeke could be under her command. However, Jill remained firm in her decision not to separate from him too soon, fearing the loneliness that might come if they parted abruptly. Hades then asked about the snacks she had while waiting, reminding her that her family would be eagerly waiting for her back home. Hades instructed his guard to bring sweets into the palace, but the guards declined, choosing to stay by his side to observe Jill's care for him. They were supportive, encouraging her throughout. When the tea session ended, Alyssa asked the guards to stop interrupting her and the Emperor, but one guard hinted that the Emperor's support was her only authority, suggesting that he was fully in her favor. Alyssa replied that there was no formal agreement between her and the Emperor. They teased her, remarking that frequent gatherings with him might raise his hopes, and another guard added they would always stand by her side. Zeke remarked that she could ignore such childish flirting, and Jill admitted that it was her first experience with romantic gestures, leaving her uncertain of how to respond. She clarified that she had no intention of introducing love into their relationship since they were preparing for marriage, and if romance were allowed, she wouldn't feel able to scold the Emperor if he ever made mistakes. Zeke pointed out that it was a rather blunt way to view their relationship, and Camilla added that both Jill and the Emperor were still quite young. Jill, in turn, reflected that she had brought both Camilla and Zeke into her world from a different era. Determined to avoid repeating her past mistakes, she resolved to make better choices this time around. Zeke then noticed her dragon ring and asked if that was what it was. Jill confirmed, noting that she couldn't remove it, and speculated that the curse could be real. She mentioned that the Emperor had suggested the curse would calm if she stayed close to him. Camilla responded that such legends always have a trace of truth, affirming the likelihood of a curse. Jill, startled by the conversation, expressed her unease, and Zeke reassured her, asking if the legends in her homeland of Kratos were different. Jill explained that long ago, dragons had different views on their relationship with humans, leading to a conflict. One side wanted to protect humans out of love, while the other preferred to rule them through logic, ultimately dividing the lands into Kratos and Zravi. Zeke then spoke of how a curse had left the land barren until the Dragon Emperor married a woman with powerful magic, creating a magical shield around Jalrakia that protected it from the curse, forming their current borders. Jill, amazed, was surprised to learn that this legend existed beyond Kratos. At that moment, Princess Saphir arrived, delivering a letter to Jill that she claimed required immediate attention. Jill, shocked by the familiar handwriting, dropped the letter, which floated away. Emperor Hades caught it, expressing his admiration for the dedication of the crown prince who had written it, stating that he was preparing for a grand welcome celebration and had accepted Jill's love challenge. He concluded by saying, "Love is war," leaving everyone intrigued. And so the episode ends, promising more exciting moments in future episodes. Stay tuned.